We are back.
May I ask something?
Sure, sure.
I saw what you show up to us, that we call a value of the list by the positioning in the list, like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Mm-hmm.
If we have a second array in the global scope,
Mm-hmm.
how can we solve this? I mean, if I call 0, which list is going to be pointed from the two?
So we have two global variables that contain a list, an array, right?
Yes, right.
Okay, I will create another. What should the name of this array be?
Um, let's say list again. I don't know.
Can we do that? Can we declare a variable with the same name?
No. So,
So let's do that just to see the error. So it says identifier list has already been declared. So once we declare a variable with a name, we cannot use it in the same scope. We can do it in a different scope, but in the same scope, we can do it. So let's say, I don't know, students.
yes, maybe.
And what value should I put?
Whatever. I mean,
Ah,
if we have whatever inside,
mhm.
uh, the positioning remain the same. So if we write 0 positioning,
Sorry.
do I get a leaky or I get true?
Wait a minute. So you said students. We're trying to access the list, the array students, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay. It's pretty clear now, because I had in mind a list should remain a list for some reason. So yeah, it's pretty clear now. Thank
These are
you.
two different lists, two different arrays, okay?
Mm-hmm.
We
Mm-hmm.
use their names, their variable names, to access either the first or the second list, the students or the list. Okay, arrays, I would say arrays. And whenever we say students, we get this array. Whenever we get list, we get this array. There are two
Yes.
completely different arrays.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. So, another thing I want to note here is that, for example, the array named list. So if you have noticed on index 3, I have this entry. There's an array, another array inside the array list. So once I get list 3, as I've described before, JavaScript looks for list variable, it looks for position 3, and it replaces this whole uh, thing with the value. So list brackets 3 will become 1, 2, 3. And since I now have an array, I can also use the bracket notation to get, for example, the second element. And since list brackets 3 is exactly the same as 1, 2, 3, I can also do this like this. So now we have an array inside another array. We use the first brackets to get that array, to get 1, 2, 3. And once we have that array, we can use another bracket notation to get an element from this inner array, 1, 2, 3. So this will give us 1, 3, or undefined. If I try to access an array element that is not there, the array 1, 2, 3 has only 3 elements, so I will get undefined, no matter how big the number. So, And this can go as deep as I want. I can have an array inside an array, which has another array, and so forth. And the way to access is through this bracket notation. So if I want to get, let's say, 33, to get 33, I will use list position 3 and position 2, because I have one, these are the indexes. So I will first look for the element at position 3. This whole array is one single element in the list array. So I get 3. And then once I'm inside here, this, let's draw something here. So this and this is this part. And then 2 corresponds to this part. As you can see, JavaScript goes bracket by bracket. First, it picks the array, it picks the element that we want from the array. Then it goes into the second bracket and picks that element from the inner, let's say, array. So we saw that we can use we can put functions inside arrays. We can also reference them or declare the functions directly inside the arrays. Because as I told you, when we get a variable or a function, there's kind of a replacement. JavaScript will look at this variable with this function named sub. It will get the associated value, and it will replace this sub with this whole function. So this is exactly what we did here, but instead of declaring function elsewhere and then just saying mul, we just do this whole thing inside the array. Now, let's say that I want to add a new function to the array. That is, I want to add a new element to the array. Adding elements to an array. So let's use the simplest example possible, the students array. So I will move this here just to make things simpler with strings instead of functions. So whenever I want to add something to an array, I can use the name of the array and the unshift command to add one or more values to the array at the beginning of the array. So students, as you can see now, has Kiuri and Selena added at the beginning of the array. It was Aleki, Rami. Now at the beginning we have. If I want to remove an element, the first element from an array, I will use the shift command. So unshift adds one or more values at the beginning of the array. The shift does the opposite. It removes the first element. It always works with a single element. If I want to remove more elements, I will have to write the command again. So students, what do you think students will have now? If I write presenter, what will the students array contain? Aliki and Rami, exactly. Because on line 44, I added 2 names, and then on the next 2 lines, I removed them. And pay close attention to what happens when I run the students shift command, this time on the console, just to make things. So I'm going to run the command, and I get a value returned, Aliki. Okay, what is this Aliki? Is this the students? Let's check. No, the students has now just Rami inside because I removed the first value. But what is this Aliki? Okay, it's the first thing, but why is it here? Now, in order to understand this, as always, we have to dig into MDN. So I will search for MDN JS shift, Mozilla Developer Network, JavaScript language, shift function. I will see this kind of strange array prototype. We'll learn more about prototype later on, but I see, okay, array. I was looking for an array, so I think this might be it, and the shift function. So I'm going to go here, and it says, of course, the shift method removes the first element from an array and returns that removed element. So this is what we were seeing earlier. This is the Aliki, as you can see. The method not only removes the first element, method is another way for a function, another name for a function. So whenever you see method, think of function, okay? It's exactly the same. There's a small difference, we will see it later, but it's another name for a function. So it removes the first element from an array, but also returns a value. As we mentioned earlier, the functions should return something. Most of the times they should return some kind of value. So the shift command returns the element that was just removed. So the command actually does 2 things. It takes an array and removes the first element, and then it returns back that removed element. Why? Because most of the times when we remove something from an array, we might want to get that value and do something before moving on. For example, informing the users that a Aliki was removed from the students, or a product was removed from a list. Okay, that array can contain products, or a shopping cart, emails. Whenever you see a list of things, 2 or more similar things together on the web, it's almost always an array. YouTube videos, search results, products, tweets, Facebook posts, Instagram posts. Whenever you see 2 or more similar things together, there's probably, or I would say definitely, an array behind this list of similar things. So arrays are everywhere and are the most common data structure that we use and see. So I can use this return, and I can say alert student shift was just removed from class. So what am I doing here? I'm using the alert function to display this pop-up box. And inside, I'm going to display the following message. I'm going to display the result, the return value of this function, the students.shift. And when I get this value, I'm going to concatenate, I'm going to connect it with another string which says was just removed from the class. So let's run it. And it says that Rami was just removed from class. The student's shift does two things: removes the first element, which is Rami, and then it returns back this value. So now I can use the removed value and inform, let's say, the user or the visitor or anyone who uses the interface that something was removed from a list. So this is pretty useful. And of course, the student array is now empty. So most of the times we want to keep track of how many elements we have in an array. How many students do we have in class? How many products do we have in a shopping cart? How many tweets do we have? How many new emails? How many search results or whatever? So in order to do that, JavaScript gives us a very, very important array property, as it's called. And it's the dot length property. It gives us the number of elements inside an array. We use the array element, the array name, and the dot length syntax to get the length of the array, which is automatically calculated. So if I say here, I'm putting a string along with the message so that I can see something more informative in my console. Okay, this doesn't help because of my screen, but student's length is 4. If I now put this console log, I'm copying and pasting here and here, you will see that this property, this number, automatically gets updated by JavaScript. So on line 43, you can see the line here. We have Alik and Rami. We have 2 students. On line 47, we just added Kiuri and Selina, so we have 4 students. And then on line 50, we have just 2 students left because we just removed Kiuri and Selina with 2 shifts. So write the code, test, and hit me with your questions. Or ideas, or whatever code you would like to see together and talk about it. Keep in mind that teaching is a collaborative process. We are all into teaching. I am not teaching. We are all teaching. We're all into the teaching process, and we're all learning. So,
question.
Mm-hmm.
You said that this is called properties,
Mm-hmm.
and it looks really similar to what string methods are. So
Mm-hmm.
we say that they are all functions.
Exactly. So log and shift are functions because we can see the parentheses right after them. And these are called properties. When we see the dot, the main here characteristic is the dot. So whenever we see some kind of name with a dot, the thing that comes after the dot is either a property, if we have dot and a name, like length or something else, we will see. If after the dot we get a name along with parentheses, it's called a method. So student's length is a property, And console.log is a method which is similar to a function. So let me see also the question, reposition the array items. If we could try, thanks, reorder the array items so that index 0 to 4 will be on one side and will be on another side. Okay, so let's say that we have, let's check what Patrick says. So we have a list, we'll call it numbers, and we want to have 0, or should we, okay, I will use the students. we will do it, Patrick, just we're going to learn some. I'm going to re-add Kiuri and Selena, but at the end of the array. So in order to add at the end of the array, we will use students push Kiuri and Selena. So now, if I write students length, I will see 4 because the students array now has Kiuri and Selena at the end of the array. As you can see, push pushes. You can think of push as someone pushing along a corridor some packages that they will place at the end of, let's say, the corridor or of the storehouse, the warehouse. So pushing at the end of an array with push. And if I add, let's say, Kostas also, but at some point I decide that that's a mistake, Kostas is not a student, I can remove him So let's check students again at this point. I'm going to pause in here for a minute so that you write. I have 5 elements in the array. It has also Kostas, and I will just add this. We can remove from the end of the array with the pop. It's like shift, but it works on the opposite side of the array. It removes one element from the back of the array, from the end of the array. So how I like to remember these 2 pairs, because I think of them as pairs. I have push and pop, which work on the end of the array. We push values and we pop them. We destroy the value from the end. And we have the shift and unshift pair, which works on the beginning of the array. And these 2 enable us to remove or add values on either sides of the array. And of course, if I write students now, we will have 4 students with Kostas being removed on line 53. Sorry, on line 56. Now, Patrick says, okay, we have Aliki, Rami, Kiuri, and Selena. What if we wanted, for example, to have Aliki, Selena, Rami, Kiuri? Is it something like this, Patrick, just rearranging the order of the elements?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So how do you think we can manage to do this? what plan can we devise to?
I was thinking maybe we could work out, like, have the index of. So you have the array dot index of, and then kind of go through the array elements and kind of maybe using modulus operand to work out whether the index is even or odd. But it gets complicated.
Yeah. Okay. So how about with the commands that we just seen? Let's say we only know shift and shift pop. Maybe we can sort of plan a strategy here. We don't care about being like the optimal solution or like the best solution. We don't care about that. We just need to get this done. So how can we think as hackers? We have some tools. We have pop, push. How can we do this? This is what hacking is all about. We have some tools and we want to achieve something, and we have to think in creative ways. So let's keep this a leaky RAM. Okay, we have this. Let's say we have this, and we want this one. So right now it's all about being and getting creative. Forget about other commands or being fast or whatever. We just want this to get there. Even if we write 50 commands, we don't care. We just want to make things happen. How would you, let's say, think of going at this point with just the commands that we saw? Think of as these being cards on a table, and you are trying to rearrange them. You have cards on a table, and you can move them along. You can just, how would you go about? We don't care about the best way, the optimal way. We just need to find a way to use the tools that we have to do what we want. This is the essence of hacking. Getting creative. Yeah.
You would pop like array dot students dot pop to remove so you pop 3 times, I guess, to remove the last 3 elements. And then you would then start adding elements to elements.
So we're removing Selena, Rami, and Curie one by one, and we get a leaky. So we're at this point, and we need to add these 3 persons. And what we should do now? What should we do now?
Push, so students dot push, and then in the parentheses, I guess you can put. No, you can only push 1 item at a time, I guess.
No,
So
one or more. You can push.
Oh, can you? Right, okay. So inside the push parentheses, put Selena, Rami, and Curie. Yes.
Okay, let's see what we have here. So Aliki, Selena, Rami, and Curie. So we get what we want with just 2 commands. Okay, but can we replace these values with the values that we just removed instead of writing them by hand?
I guess you can put students.pop inside the push.
Okay, so let's try this. So students push. I'm going to comment this. And let's see what we get. Okay, let's see what we get now. Aliki, Selena, Kiuri, and Rami. So close, but we get different kind of result. But it's a really nice way to be creative. And as you can see, we just put the students pop inside the parentheses, and we will get the value out of the array and then push it. Maybe we can store the values of student pop inside a variable and then use a variable. So we can mix these commands, the pop, the shift, the unshift, and then we can do whatever we want. This is a really nice exercise. I'm going to leave it as an exercise. And I want you to practice after the lesson. So first try. Being creative to be continued. So this is a really nice exercise to try to use a limited amount of tools, a limited amount of commands to achieve what you want. I already told you it does not matter if there is a command that does it in a single line. It doesn't matter if we can do it better or faster. We have to use our problem-solving skills, and it's really good exercise to practice and see what we can achieve with just the tools that we want. So this is being creative and getting into the hacker mentality. We got a glimpse of how we can achieve this. There are really, literally, multitudes, I don't know, 100 of ways to do this. This is a really nice exercise. You can do it with just these commands. We can also learn new commands and do it, but try to figure out multiple ways to do this. Store the variables that you push, that you unshift or pop. Try to figure out the order. What would be a better way to do it? For example, you might find yourself to achieve the result with 5 commands. Then try to think, can I do it with less commands, like 4 or 3? Can I do it more by writing better code or making it a little bit easier to read or repeat? Armando says, I think it wouldn't work if we had hundreds of values. Yes, of course, if we have hundreds of values, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't be efficient, we wouldn't write it, but it's a really nice exercise with a few values. So I'm leaving this as a practice. It's a really nice exercise that came up. Questions up to this point? Arrays are really, really, really important. You have to master arrays. There are a lot of coding interview questions or challenges that involve arrays, and we get to work with arrays all the time. So you have to master these kind of data structures, and you have to become creative and manipulate these structures with all the tools that you get and in various creative and ingenious ways. So arrays are really important. Is there a shorter way to write students pop 3 times, like 3 students pop? So Vaso asks if there is a shorter way to write students pop 3 times. Really, really nice question. So let's be creative now. Again, once again, challenge accepted. Vaso. We have an array, like big array with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and A, B, C. And let's say we want to remove A, B, C because we don't want any non-numbers. But we don't want to write pop. Let's say we'll put more just to make this a little bit harder to do it by hand. So if I want to remove A, B, C, D, E, I can do E, D, C, B, A. But if I get like 2034 letters, I can definitely not do this. So what can we use here to make our life easier?
A function.
A function. How would the function like help us here?
You can like have a function that has I guess yeah, I can like have a function that can do this 4 times or 5 times. So inside the function you would have, you know, lines, you know, the highlighted lines inside the function.
Yes, but we still have to write repeat code inside the function, I guess. So Nikos says that we can use a for loop. Exactly. This is where we need to use loops. Loops in programming is a way to repeat some code automatically. So run one line of code or multiple lines of code many times automatically without manually writing, let's say, pop, 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 pop. So instead of writing pop 6 times or 5 times here, we're going to use a for loop. So this is not efficient, especially with with 1 million elements to remove. So instead, we're going to use a for loop. So loops do something multiple times. Okay, maybe the simplest explanation description will be do something multiple times with a better way than by just repeating the lines. So this is where we get the loops, and now we are going to see the for loop, which is a way to run something multiple times. So how does the for loop works? We use for parentheses, some rules that we are going to see inside. Don't write something at this point. I'm going to write some pseudocode, and so it doesn't matter. We get an error. This is not proper JavaScript. So this is the basic structure of a for loop. The rules define how many times the code inside the brackets will be repeated. So inside here, we will see some rules that define how many times this code will be repeated. So let me make an annotation. So rules for how many times this code inside the brackets will be repeated again and again. We define some lines of code. We don't have a limit here. They can be as many as we want. And in here, we will define some rules to help us run this code sometimes. So let's keep this commented. And pay close attention to the syntax. Let's say test, and after run after. So the for loop contains 3 statements, which are separated as all statements by the semicolon. So we have 3 parts inside the parentheses. It's a little bit confusing in the beginning. There's a lot of things to remember, but as you progress and write more and more for loops, you will become familiar with it. So inside this parentheses, we have 3 statements which are separated by semicolons. And the first one, it's an initial statement. What means an initial statement? It's a code that will get executed before the for loop starts, and it will be executed only once. So I will write this down. So most of the times, what we want to run, what the code that we want to run before running the loop, is that we create a kind of a counter, a variable that will hold a value. For example, we can start with a counter and give it a value of 0. And this counter will be increasing constantly. We'll be going from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3. And in this way, we can count how many times the code has run. So first of all, I will have to, okay, give me a minute. I will tell you why in a minute I've done this. So just give me a second. Now, I don't want you at this point to write the code. And there's a very important reason for this. When I finish this loop, I will tell you to write the code. But at this point, just bear with me and follow along. Because I don't know if you noticed, the browser just got frozen before. I had to close the open tab. We'll see why. So initial statement, something that is run before the for loop gets executed, and it runs only once. This is the first statement that we put here. So I say, okay, let the counter be 0, start with 0, a variable counter 0. Then the test, this is the important part. This runs on every iteration. Iteration means iteration. Every time the code here gets executed. So loop means running the code inside the curly braces many, many times. Each time this code runs, we call it an iteration. One time that the code inside the block has just got executed. So in here, we test to see, we start iterating. We run the code and we test a condition. We place some tests here to see if we are going to proceed to the code running, to the next iteration. Otherwise, we just leave the for loop. So, for example, the test right now that we want to put here is to see if the counter is, let's say, smaller, less than the number of characters that we want to remove. We want to remove 5 characters. We want to run the code 5 times. So we need 5 pops. So we need 5 times. So we are going to say, test if the counter is less than 5. If it's less than 5, run the code inside the brackets. If this is true, the code inside here will run indefinitely, infinitely. So if this is always true, if I place true here, the for loop will run forever. And this is very, very bad. We need the loops to stop at some point. Okay, otherwise we will get into what is called an infinite loop, something that will break the code, will block the code, and the subsequent lines will never get executed. So at this point, we have to check to see if we are going to continue running the code. This means that at some point, this will have to evaluate to false. Otherwise, we will get the code running again and again. So we need to ensure that at some point, this will become false. Now, when will counter 0 become false? If it becomes greater than or equal to 5. And we can do it here inside the brackets. We can say, let the counter be the previous value plus 1. So in here, I'm adding 1 to the counter, so that at some point, it will go from 0 to 1, 2, 3, 4. It will reach 5, and it will stop. So let's check this code. I will tell you if, let me see. Yep, it works. So now you can write the code and test it. Please write the code and see this loop. Be careful to write the code exactly as I'm writing, because there's a chance that you will be getting into an infinite loop. This means that the code will run always, forever. It will never stop. So it needs a little bit of attention here, your attention here. This is probably the only case in front-end development where things break in a manner where we have some serious problem. Now, the problem is not serious. The problem is that the browser will freeze, will execute the code infinitely, and we won't be able to interact with the web page or execute the code. And at that point, we have to close the tab, the browser's tab, or maybe the browser sometimes, and then fix the code and run the code again. This is no big deal. It's just closing and starting the tab again. And this is, I think, the only case where in front-end development we get to, like, okay, in quotes, serious problem. I'm telling you this because in front-end it's really nice. You can test and you can do whatever with what you want without ever damaging something. It's very difficult to damage something in front-end development. We don't have a database. We don't have access to files on the system. We cannot delete files from the hard drive. So it's pretty safe to work on the browser. There are not many cases where we can really hurt, let's say, our system. Or let me know, could it also be counter -5? Where exactly in the code, Selena?
I mean, at the line 91,
Mm-hmm.
there is this equation that
Mm-hmm.
says counter equals counter plus 1,
Mm-hmm.
which is the same thing in my mind like the array, the big array,
Mm-hmm.
minus 5 elements. A, B, C, D, E. But I don't know if it starts from the end of the array or the beginning. So this is my question actually.
So you want to set a value to counter at this point, right?
Yes.
And what do you want the value to be? What do you have in mind?
I want to have like, in my mind, counter plus 1 means that we are at 7, so the function stops working. Am I right?
So first of all, when you say big, what kind of value do you have in mind?
I have this array in my mind, so all of these that are after this.
Okay, you are subtracting then an array, a number from an array. Can this be done? Is this two numbers that we can subtract, or is it something that will produce and not a number, and none, an error?
Yes, maybe it's an error. Yes.
So we can never subtract, we can never do an arithmetic operation with something that is not a number. So big is an array. We cannot subtract an array and from a number. We could, of course, use the length, which is actually the length of the array.
Okay.
And to be honest, I'm going to check the length, which is 12, okay? So if we want to do something with subtraction, we would use length. Otherwise, big would produce not a number. JavaScript says, what are you doing here? You are subtracting a number from an array. How is this possible? None, and then it stops us there. So can you revise your strategy here? Do you think that we're getting somewhere with this kind of equation?
I think this seems right to me now. Big length minus 5.
Mm-hmm. So we get 7.
Okay. Okay. So that doesn't affect the equation because we should define counter with counter plus or minus something. Am I right?
The point here is, let me run the code again, is that we start with the counter 0. You can see the first iteration, the counter is 0. It goes to 1, 2, 3, 4, because we add at each iteration 1. This code runs 5 times each iteration. And at some point, the counter reaches a level where it becomes it becomes 5. And then when the code block stops and the counter is 5, we get to this statement. This condition runs before running each iteration. Let me make this clear. Okay. Check before running. Before going here. So we have counter 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. At the last iteration, this is equal to 5. Okay, this code runs 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. At the 5th time, this will be 4 plus 1 equals 5. So before running this code again, JavaScript will check this condition. So counter will be 5. Now, is 5 less than 5? No, this will be true. Once this is false, and only then, this is important, the loop will end here, and the loop and move to the next line. This is the time where the code continues at this point on line 94. Only when this condition reaches a false condition, a false evaluation. When this condition evaluates to false, we can put whatever we want, we can test whatever we want here. So this is how we how this thing works. So let me. It starts by declaring a variable and setting the value to 0. Okay, nothing runs, just this command. And then it checks this condition. Is counter less than 5? Yes, it is. It's 0. So it executes this code. And by executing this code, we get iteration 0. At the last line of this iteration, counter is going from 0 to 0 plus 1. So we get counter equals 1. Now, JavaScript goes back here and checks to see if this condition is still true before moving inside the block and running the code again. This is always the case. It has to test before going into each iteration. Now, counter is 1. Is counter 1 less than 5? Yes, it is. Run the code again. We run the code again, and we see this result. Iteration 1. On the last line of the iteration, we get counter equals 1 plus 1, meaning 2. We have counter equals 2. JavaScript goes into here. Is 2 less than 5? Yes. Run the code. Again, again, again. At some point during the 5th iteration, counter is 4. So at this line, counter will be 4 plus 1 equals 5. Before running this code again, JavaScript will check to see if counter is less than 5. Is 5 less than 5? No, it's not. It's equal. So this whole thing get, let's say, put out of the way, and we get to the following statement or statements. And so we have to, most of the time, we have to declare some kind of counter, something that will count the times that we want this code to run, a condition that will check to see if something is true or false. This is very important. It's very important to think before you save and run your code, to have the condition, to have the line of code that will make this statement false. If, for example, I don't have this line, if I don't have something in my code that will make the condition counter less than 5 equal to false, this code will run forever. This is not something that we want. So before saving and running your code, make sure that you have some kind of code that makes at some point this condition false. Otherwise, you're doing it wrong, okay? Now, we have this condition and we made this counting from 0 to up to 5, but not including 5, because we want to run this code 5 times, like this. Why we want to run this code 5 times? because we want to remove at each iteration an element. So when the iteration stops, the big array will be 7 and elements length. 12 minus 5 that we just removed, and we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if I just remove these lines, which are just comments, and this line, we use just 2 lines to remove these elements. So instead of 5 lines of code, I can use 2 lines and a for loop. If I had 1,000,000 elements, I could just write here 1,000,000, and I could use 2 lines again of code to remove or to execute a code 1,000,000 times. So you can see this is a time saver and a life saver. Questions? I'm not removing this by Selena. It's really nice idea to investigate and see how we can write this thing differently. We can, and it's always a good practice to try to think how we can do one thing with various ways, in various ways. Write the code, test it. If we want to move 5 elements which are located in the middle, what we do? So we can still use the for loop. This is really nice. We can still use the for loop and the commands that we have just learned to do this kind of manipulation. But since things get a little bit tricky when we have to deal with elements not on either sides of the array, for example, at the end or at the start, because we have pop and shift and unshift, when we have to deal with values inside the array, especially with values that are not, for example, a single value, maybe we want 3, 4, 7, C and D, we will see more array methods or array functions, it's the same thing, to deal with this kind of situation. So Armando, there are other commands which are better suited for this kind of things. If we get creative and hacky, we can also do this with the commands and the loops that we learn. But this will become really, really difficult to write and read. So we try to use other methods for this. Now, at this point, we saw the initial statement. This should be clear by now. This is something, a code that runs, a statement that runs before the for loop and just only once. And we have a test condition that runs before its execution. This is the trigger for executing this block. If this is true, we get this code executed. Otherwise, we just leave the for loop and move on to the next line. Now, what is this third statement? What is this run after iteration? So in here, we can place a statement that will get executed right after the execution of the code. So, for example, I'm just putting a string here. It's a statement also. So this, let's say if I run console log run, you can see that this code runs 5 times. Yes. And this is the same as if I place the code right here. This is what run after iteration means. When the code starts to execute, line by line, at some point it reaches the end of execution. It goes here. And at that point, JavaScript automatically, through the for loop, runs this statement before moving on to the test. So this means that we can place this really important statement from here in here. And this code, without we don't need the semicolon at the end, this code will get executed automatically right after each iteration. So let's do another very, let's say, simpler example to recap for loops. So first of all, the statement that will get executed before the for loop. I will say let start equals 1. I'm setting a variable that will be this is important. This variable will live in a private scope, the for loop scope. Remember about scopes and function scopes? Now the for loops also have their own scope. The scope is always created whenever you see these brackets, these curly braces, in functions, in for loops, in other cases. Whenever there's a curly brace start and end, we have a new scope, meaning that we can have private variables inside here. So in this case, the let start, the variable that we declare inside the parentheses, will be a private variable inside these two curly braces. It cannot be accessed outside this box, okay? It's a private scope. This is important. So, initial condition. Next, we need the condition to check when this will stop. So I will say, come on, I want to run the code as long as start is less or equal than 10. So we start from 1. We check to see if start contains a value which is less than or equal to 10. And we run the code. If this is true, we move on and execute the code. If it's false, we get out of the loop and we move on to the next line. So, and the final statement, the third statement in a for loop, it's the code to be executed right after each iteration. And in this point, I want to say start equals start plus 2. So I'm adding 2 this time to start. And let's see what we will get. No, sorry. Start and start. And let's check to see when we will reach this this line, when the for loop will finish. So if I go here, this is where this second loop starts. We have a variable, a private variable for the for loop scope, which is start, and it has an initial value of 1. And then we check if start is equal or less than 10. Yes, it is. 1 is less than 10. So the code gets executed and we get 1, start 1. At the end of this iteration, this third statement automatically gets executed. So we get start equals start plus 2. This means 1 plus 2 equals 3. And so on the next check, start will be 3. Now, this whole process finishes and we go to the check. Is start, now it's 3, less than or equal to 10? Yes, this is true. So we get 3. The process continues. We run the code. At the final step, we run this third statement. We get from 3, we go to 5, to 7, to 9, and so on. Armando asks if we use start plus 2. Yes, there is a operator. Sorry. This thing can be, there's a syntax that we can use to write this exactly same thing by appending to the already, to the value that start has already, to append this value. This produces exactly the same result with less characters. So this means that get the variable start, get the value of start variable and add to it 2. So if start has a value of 10, add to 10 2. So this is just another operator that we can use, as Armando mentioned, to write this in a shorter function. So in the beginning, you can use whatever syntax makes the result, the code looks more clear. And then as you move on, you can gradually use more complex commands. Questions? Run the code, make sure it works. And in case you run, and you will run into what is called an infinite loop, I mean, it means that your for loop will run infinitely forever, and you will never get to the next line. For example, if I get into an infinite loop here, the code will run millions of times per second, and I will never get to line 102. This is something, of course, that we never want to get ourselves into. And if at some point your browser gets stuck and you cannot like click or do something, or on the console, it will run the code again and again and again, you can either close the tab. If it's really stuck, I use to open a new new tab and close this tab like this, because Chrome puts this tab on the background if we switch to a different tab. Or you can go to the window on Chrome. There's also something similar to Firefox. On Firefox, we use Task Manager, and we try to find the tab that we are using. Okay, now I have a lot of is this, what's the title? Document. Okay, I should have put a title. I have to find the tab. Okay, I have a lot of tabs now. And let's say if this is the tab. Yes, I think, yeah, this is the tab. I can click and process, and this will remove and stop the process, this tab. I will not do this now. Let's open another window just to showcase. So let's go to CNN and I will go to Window, Task Manager, find CNN. I think it will be easier to find. Here is the tab, End Process, and it's gone. So I can now close it. This is in the case where we get to an infinite loop, okay? And the browser gets like frozen. So for loops. Now, let's move on and see some other array methods or functions, okay? I don't want you right now to be confused or try to understand like the difference. It's all this think of them as exactly the same thing. Functions and methods, two names to talk about a code that we execute again and again using the parentheses. It's just this at this point. So let's say we have an array of students with some errors inside. For example, we have Kostas and Demian, which are not students. And the rest are students. So I will make this a little bit. Okay. At this point, you will see that I'm getting all the console log messages from above, which is something a little bit annoying at this point. So I can either click on Clear Console or press Control L. As you can see, it says Control L. So with Controller, I can clear the console. Or if I don't want to run at this point the command, the pressing the keys or clearing the console manually, I can place a command called console clear here at this point. And on line 105, this command executes the clear method or function, and the console is cleared. So this is just a handy command when you want to clear the console and debug stuff. So we don't use it in production. We use it just when we develop and we try to debug. So we have this class and we want to remove, for example, Kostas and Demian. And we don't want to get into the trouble of using for loops and pops and unshifts and moving and popping and writing a lot of commands. So we can use a command, a really powerful command, which is called class 12 slice. So there's this array method or array function. And as you can see, all these functions are used by appending the dot after the name of the array and then the name of the function. You will learn more about how this works, this system works. So this slice allows exactly what the word says. We're going to slice the array like a pizza, and we're going to grab only the parts that we want. But I want you to note here, important note, not oddly enough, there's another command called splice. There's a P inside splice, which also works on arrays. It's rather similar, and we try to avoid splice, except at the beginning where we learn JavaScript. But these are not the same commands. They are different commands and they do different things, and in a different way, which is very important. So we're just going to take a look right now at slice, which is let's say, a safer function. This is what we use most of the times. Splice is barely used. So what is slice? It allows us to take a part of an array and get just a part of that array as a copy. So we do not have really a pizza and we slice and we take some pieces. Maybe that was not the best example. When we slice a pizza with slice with a JavaScript function, we get new copies. So we get extra, let's say, pieces of the pizza. The pizza remains intact and we get copies of the elements. So I will search for MDN JS slice just to see and it says the slice method returns a shallow copy. We will understand what shallow it means, but keep in your mind in copy. It returns a copy of a portion of an array. So we take some elements from an array as a copy and we place them in a new array. Now, I will scroll down. We'll see these examples later on. I will scroll down to see if there are any parameters. So slice accepts parameters, 2 parameters, and I want you to carefully understand this syntax. Whenever we see something in brackets, here in the syntax, in MDN, it means that this is optional. Okay? So we can use slice with no arguments at all. Since slice accepts 2 arguments, start and end, and these arguments are both in brackets, this means that these are optional parameters. So we can just run slice without any arguments. You have to understand this syntax. So 2 parameters, start, comma, end, but they are enclosed in brackets just to make sure to remind us that these are optional parameters. So start. Yeah, yes? I didn't. Did someone wanted to say something? So the first argument, it says 0 based index at which to start extraction. In simple terms, this is where we want to start slicing. We use the indexes. It means the 0 to 1. We will use this index. These are the numbers that we should play out start. And this is where we want to start slicing. And at the end, we will use another index. And it says before which to end extraction. Let's see this in an example because it will make more sense. So let's say, for example, that I want to cut these 2 elements from the array. I want to use a start index, which will be 3, and an end index. So this will be the start. And I want to cut from here to here. But let's see how we can understand that rather. I will say 3. I will write 4. So it starts at position 3 and it stops at position 4 without getting the element at position 4. This is what the documentation was trying to say to us, that the end index is not the element at which we want to stop and slice it and get that command, is the number at which you want to stop slicing, but without including the, sorry, we have 5 elements, without including that element. So if we want to take Kostas and Damian, we don't have to write 3, 4, but 3, 5. So, and, but without this element. So this is where the slice stops or ends, but without taking this element at this position under consideration. It will only take all the previous. So this is how slice works. We start at some point and then we end at some point. But keep in mind that the point at which we end is not taken into consideration. It is not contained into the result. What is the result of this function? We have a return statement. This slice is a function and it must return a value. It returns an array, a new array, with the sliced elements, but these are copies. If I go to class 12, I can still see Kostas and Damian, and of course everything else. This slice command had no effect on the original array. If I want to say, for example, const, I don't know, okay, teachers, I will say, Damian is not the teacher, but 12 slice 3 to 5. And this will give me the teachers, a new array, let me put autosave. So I have Kostas and Damian. And of course, class 12 still has the teachers inside. So we can slice a part of this array and we can do another thing. I can have an array called, let's say, it doesn't come to mind. Let's say all teachers. Let's say I have another array which has pollen inside. It's called all teachers. And I want to take the teachers array and put it inside the all teachers. I want to concatenate, but this time not strings as we saw with the plus operator, but with arrays. So the way I can do it is I can say all teachers concatenate and teachers. And it will give me back all the teachers of all teachers plus the elements that were inside the teachers array. But the teachers and all teachers arrays remain intact. This means that the concat method or function also does not have any effect on the arrays on which it operates. It takes the elements and it puts them into a new array. So const, let's say, full, okay, so I will say this more teachers and all teachers will be the result of the concatenation of more teachers with the concat command on the teachers. So you can think of this as more teachers plus teachers. A concatenation using arrays. We can not use the plus sign, okay? This is important. And we can concatenate two or more arrays. We can get more arrays together. You will go to MDN, JS concat, read more about this concat function or method, and you will learn more about how it works. The important thing is to know that concat as slice do not affect the initial or the original arrays. Class 12 is not affected by the slice. We get a copy. Also, more teachers or teachers do not get affected from concat. We get copies. And now the practice is for you to create a new array with just the students of class 12. So you will use the commands that we learned to create the slice command and the concat command to get a new array which will contain only Aliki, Kiuri, So, Kato, Elvis, and not Kostas and Demian. So go into this task and we'll be back in a few minutes to see how to getting through. If you have any questions.
Hi, Costa. I know you said about slice having, like, you don't need to have any numbers inside the brackets, but I did I tested it out and it doesn't do anything.
So what did you test?
Like just having the array dot slice and then brackets nothing, so there's nothing in the brackets, and then it doesn't do anything. Like it returns the same array as I.
What does it returns?
The original array.
No, it's not the original. It's a copy.
Copy. Okay.
Yeah. Slice always returns the copy of the elements. So if we use, really nice question, if we use, I really like that you checked on the slice. If we use slice without any parameters, it returns a new copy of the array. So this is a really handy way to get a copy of an array. So if we don't want to mess with class 12, we can say const copy. These lines gives back a copy of array class 12. We can do anything we want with copy. We can pop and unshift, and the initial array class 12 will remain intact. We have two different arrays now. So play around with copy, destroy it, remove elements, do whatever you want, and you can do this safely because it's a copy of class 12. Class 12 remains intact. So yes. And this is the mindset that you should have, like play around, break things, try everything you can imagine. This is the only way to learn. So whatever comes to mind, whatever crazy idea you have, just play around and see what results you get and how it works. So let's try to create a new array with just the students. Use slice and concat. At this point too. And then I will ask someone to guide me through the code and help me write the code so that we can get the result that we want. So, who can guide me through the code? Not write the code, just who would like to tell us how we can? So, did you manage to complete this task?
I can, but it didn't work. But I don't know if what I did wrong, but it seems quite right.
Okay, the best lessons are the ones that our code does not work. So you can help me here, Liki.
So I said let students one, like a part one, equal to class 12 dot slice, and then parentheses 0,3. And that's the first one. And then semicolons. And then the next line is let students 2 equal class 12 slice 5. And then, okay, now I think I get it.
Can you write the mistake? Can you tell me the code that didn't work?
That, okay, I will tell you the end, yes. And then console log, parentheses, students 1, dot concat, students 2, yes, students. parentheses students too. I tried it like this also. And I think the mistake.
Okay, let me just put a something that we see it here because we have a lot of console logs. So we have Aliki, Kiuri, So, and Kato Elvis, which is correct. There is no mistake here. I mean, what was the?
I don't know why. Maybe something in the console, like it doesn't. I also cleared the console clear, but I don't know why it didn't work. I check again. No.
It still doesn't work?
No.
Okay, can you check the syntax?
I did. I pressed a dot after the concat.
Okay. So like here, eh?
Yes, that was it.
Okay. So yes, this is the way to get. And also, Aliki found that we can use a single parameter. So with a single argument, with command a single argument, we go from 5 up to the end. So if we just say slice 0, 1, 2, 5, I don't know, it goes from index 5 up to the end of the array and takes all the elements from 5 to the end. So if we want to start from an index and then get all the elements up to the end of the array, we can use the single argument syntax, which means that if we place slice 0, we get all the elements, which is exactly the same as slice. So slice without any arguments is like slice 0 or slice 0, comma, end of the array. If you also try to get a 12 slice, let's say, okay, we can use this syntax, or let's go from Kostas just to see, let's say 4, Damien, Kato, Elvis. If I use a number that does not exist, it still works. Okay, so 4, it will start from index 4, Damien, and it will go up until 9999, and it will take all the elements before that. There is no 999 position, so it will pick 5, and then it will stop searching and it will take this 5. So this also works. Of course, it makes no sense to put it this way, but it's nice to know that these things also exist in the language, and we have to know the rules. Questions up until now with everything that we covered? So 2 more methods. There are a lot of methods for arrays. So when we have an array, for example, we have this array of numbers, and we want to reverse the order, we can use the reverse in order to give us back this. Now, as you can see, I did not create a new variable to store the result of reverse because reverse is what we call a mutating method. It's one of the methods that act on the original array and it affects the original array. So it changes that what mutating means. But it's a term that you have to become familiar with. Mutates. It changes the original array. So whenever we run reverse, we are affecting the array upon which we act. So if we, for some reason, we wanted the original order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we've lost it. We can, of course, run reverse again, but if for some reason we want to have both orderings, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, we've just lost one of them. So what we can do to keep the ascending, the ASC array intact and have a copy of the array being reversed? How can I get a copy and act on that copy instead of
just creating another array?
like how?
So const asc rev.
I will call it descending, desk for descending, yeah.
Okay.
Ascending, descending.
Equals
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
asc dot reverse.
ASC, sorry, dot?
Dot reverse and now reverse.
Mm-hmm.
And parentheses. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
Okay, let's see. So can you see the ASC array in the bottom on the console log? Is it the same or has it changed?
Well, it has changed.
Mm-hmm. So every time you run the reverse method on an array, it mutates, it changes the array. So if we don't want to change the array, we cannot use this.
Okay.
So first we have to create a copy and act on that copy. So can you find a way to get a copy of the ascending array? How can we get a copy?
You can, Rami, do you want to answer that?
I can, but you can go ahead.
No, it's you do.
Okay, so we can just say const descend equals ascend and then reverse the descend.
Let's do that. So like this.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, ascending is still changing, but this is a really
Ascending
nice,
is still changing.
really nice example. So in this way, we are not creating a copy. Really like this example. We are not creating a copy. We are pointing descending to exactly the value that ascending is pointing to. So inside the memory of JavaScript right now, we have one single array. We have this bucket, and both ascending and descending variables point to the same value. So whenever we change descending or ascending, we act on the same single value. And I will, this is a nice pass, so I will use the Python tutor to explain this. That's why I like interactive students interacting. So const as equals 1, 2, 3, 4. Const disk equals ask. Okay, so let's see what happens in the background. So I have this line of code that is about to get executed. Declaring a variable, you remember the variable table. We have an ASC variable on the left column, and this variable points to this structure, to this array in memory. So variables are just pointers to values. When I declare a descending variable and say equal ascending, look what happens. So whenever the value is not a primitive, reminding you that primitives were strings, booleans, numbers, undefined, null, symbol. Whenever, so that we don't have a value, a primitive value, and we assign a variable to another variable, we get a reference to the same value. Let's check the code with a primitive to see the difference. So a string is a primitive. Let's see how this works with primitive values. The arrays belong to a category objects. So primitive values, because they are very, let's say, lightweight and they're very cheap in terms of memory, whenever we copy them, we assign a variable to another variable, we get a copy. So as you can see now, string and copy both have a copy of string. So at this point on line 5, we just copied the value. This is called pass by copy. This, on large data structures such as objects or arrays, is called pass by reference. So these arrays are costing us a lot in terms of memory, in terms of CPU and stuff like that. So JavaScript by default does not get a copy from one variable to another. It says, you know, I have an array, it costs me a lot. Let's say this is 100 megabytes. If I'm going to give you another array, you will have 200 megabytes in memory, which is really costly. So I will just point this variable to a single value. And of course, this means that if we use ascending, reverse, descending, sort, or whatever other mutating method on both of these variables, they will both change the same value and they will both point to the same value. So I can change the ascending reverse and I can console log this descending and I will see the reversed array. So they have the same value. So in order to get a copy of ascending and do whatever I want, I will first have to use a special command to get a copy, which is the slice. Now I can do whatever I want with descending. So array, variable pointing to an array. Next line, oops, we created a copy. Slice returns a copy of the array, new array in memory, exact same copy, but different things. So we get to the photocopy machine, we get a new copy, and we point this variable to the copied array. Now, if I run reverse, take a look at this closely to these two arrays. I'm going to run reverse on the descending. Before, after. So this only changes descending. And of course, the strings remain like the same. I can act on their copy and do whatever I want on string or copy and get the... So Patrick reminded us that we can use slice to get a copy. And this is how we act on arrays whenever we want to mutate, to change the array, but keep some previous array intact. This
Sorry.
Yes?
Would clone do the same thing?
The array method?
Yes. So if we do...
Let me see, I don't remember there's no clone command. Did you see this kind of, there's no clone array method?
I'm seeing it on Stack Overflow, but it's all right. Maybe I'm reading it.
What did you search for? Let's check.
Just making a copy of an array.
Let's go. Stack Overflow. So what's the title of the Stack Overflow? Or can you send us a link?
I can try. Currently,
Okay, here's
two different computers.
here's a really nice tip. When searching and Googling is a very, very big part of your job. So now, right now, I'm searching for how to make a copy of an array. I have to put JavaScript because I don't want to get an answer for Java or PHP or Python. I want to JavaScript, but I get a lot of results. If I want to search inside the specific site, I can write site Stack Overflow and the domain of the site, and Google will search only for results inside Stack Overflow or whatever I want. So keep in mind this tip. And let's say, let's try this one. Nodes are in. Let's see. Is it this, Rami?
It's not really. I can try to send you the, but I think I'm just reading it incorrectly because it's a lot of comments. And
okay, so keep this in mind. We'll dig more into objects and special types apart from primitives. But right now, keep in mind, since we're dealing with an array, which, as I say here, it's part of a big category of values in JavaScript called objects. So there's a big category called objects, and arrays are part of this category. And I will send you this link. You can try Python tutor, which is also available for JavaScript for yourself. Now, if I, and this is important, if I write type of, let's say, teachers, I will not get array, I will get object, which is a little bit strange, but we don't get array when we write type of. So this is something that you should keep in mind. So we get the slice here, and we get the copy. There are a lot of ways to get a copy of an array. If you Google, you will find many ways in JavaScript. So you can find a lot of different ways. And make sure that you don't just copy paste from Stack Overflow. Make sure to read the answers, to read all the answers, see which answers are upvoted, which have a lot of comments. Read the comments, because maybe an answer was really valid about 2 years ago, and now somebody in the comments says, you know, this has changed and now we can do it better, we can do it differently, it does not work. So the comments in the Stack Overflow section is really, really important. So any other questions before going into another short break?